A low-growing leaf, common enough to appear uninvited in gardens across temperate climates, contains more vitamin C per gram than iceberg lettuce, more calcium than spinach by some measures, and enough protein per calorie to rival cultivated greens that require fertilizer, irrigation, and annual replanting. It germinates in late winter, when the ground is still frozen elsewhere. It grows without input, reseeds itself continuously, and remains tender enough to eat raw through its entire life cycle. For centuries, it was among the first greens consumed each spring across Europe and Asia. Then industrial agriculture made it irrelevant. There is a leaf that appears in February, not in greenhouses, not under row covers, not in California fields where winter means 50 degrees and occasional rain. It appears in open ground, in northern climates, in gardens and waste places, sometimes while snow still sits in the shade of walls. It germinates in cold soil. It grows during frosts that would kill basil, tomatoes, and most of what we think of as food. By the time early spring arrives, it has already formed mats, dense, low, spreading across bare earth that a month earlier was frozen. This is not a storage crop. It is not calorie-dense. But in the months between the last of the winter root vegetables and the first of the spring greens, it is often the only fresh leaf available, and it is not marginal in nutrition. Gram for gram, this leaf contains more vitamin C than iceberg lettuce, often double or triple, depending on growing conditions. It contains more calcium than spinach by some analyses, more iron than many cultivated greens, and measurable amounts of magnesium, potassium, and plant-based protein. For something that grows without human intervention, that asks nothing of the soil, that seeds itself and returns every year, this is not a weed that happens to be edible. This is a green that was eaten on purpose for thousands of years because it appeared when nothing else did. The historical record is not ambiguous. In medieval Europe, this leaf was among the first foods consumed each spring, not as a famine substitute, not reluctantly. It was collected, prepared, eaten fresh or cooked, and recognized as a green that arrived early and reliably. The timing mattered. By late winter, stored grain was diminishing. Root vegetables kept in cellars were sprouting or rotting. Preserved foods, salted, dried, fermented, had sustained households for months, but fresh greens were absent. This leaf changed that. It grew in kitchen gardens, in fields, along paths, in churchyards. It did not need to be planted. It simply appeared, often before any intentional crop had been sown. People who depended on the seasons, who understood the calendar of available food, knew to look for it. Herbals from the 16th and 17th centuries describe it in practical terms. It was recognized as cooling, as mild, as something that could be eaten in quantity, without bitterness or the need for extensive preparation. It was fed to livestock as early forage. It was added to soups, eaten as salad, or cooked like spinach. The same plant grew across Europe, into Asia, and later wherever European agriculture spread. It was not cultivated in the way that lettuce or cabbage were cultivated. There were no varieties, no selected strains, no seed saved and sold. It did not need saving. It saved itself. In England, records from rural households mention it as a regular spring green. In parts of Europe, it appears in accounts of what was eaten during Lent, when fresh vegetables were scarce but needed. In cottage gardens, it was left to grow freely, harvested as needed, and allowed to reseed. This was not a plant people worked to preserve. It was a plant people worked around, because it was already there, already productive, already feeding them before their planted crops had even germinated. And it never stopped being productive. It simply stopped being valued. The plant did not fail. But the food system that emerged in the 19th and 20th centuries required things this leaf could not provide. It could not be stored. The leaves were tender, high in moisture, and wilted within hours of harvest. Even under refrigeration, shelf life was measured in days. Lettuce could be packed and shipped. Spinach could be bunched and sold at market. This leaf bruised if handled roughly. It turned to mush if left in a bag. It could not be mechanized. The plant grew low, often just inches above the soil. Leaves intertwined with stems and the whole mat rooted at nodes as it spread. There was no clean stem to cut, no upright head to harvest. Picking required hands, and time, and care. Machines could not touch it without destroying it. It could not be controlled. The plant self-seeded aggressively. A single patch could spread across an entire garden bed within weeks. It produced thousands of seeds per plant, and those seeds germinated in waves throughout the year. In agricultural systems that demanded rows, spacing, and predictability, this growth habit was a problem, and it could not be improved, at least not in the way that mattered to industrial breeding. There was no wild ancestor to cross with a domestic type, no genetic bottleneck to exploit for uniformity. The plant was already uniform, already successful, already doing what it had evolved to do. But what it had evolved to do was spread, survive, and reseed, not sit neatly in a crate on a truck. The food system needed crops that could be planted once and harvested in bulk. Crops that could be packed, shipped, and displayed under lights without wilting. Crops that looked the same in every field, every season, every continent. This leaf could do none of those things, and so agriculture classified it. Not as a green, not as a crop, as a weed. The definition was functional, not botanical. A weed is a plant growing where it is not wanted. And in systems designed for monoculture, uniformity, and mechanization, a self-seeding, low-growing, moisture-rich leaf that could not be stored or shipped was definitively not wanted. The fact that it was nutritious, that it had fed people for millennia, that it required no inputs, and asked nothing from the soil, none of that mattered. The market had no place for it. The knowledge did not disappear everywhere. Foragers remembered. Home gardeners, especially in rural areas, continued to recognize it. In some regions of Europe and Asia, it persisted as a minor food, eaten by those who still knew what it was. But it did not appear in supermarkets. It did not appear in cookbooks. It did not appear in the nutritional imagination of populations that had come to depend entirely on purchased food. The plant itself continued to thrive. It grew in cities, in suburbs, in parks and lawns, and the cracks of pavement. It fruited and seeded and spread, as it always had. It simply fed no one. Modern nutritional analysis has confirmed what the historical record suggested. The leaf is nutrient-dense, particularly relative to its caloric content. 100 grams delivers significant fractions of daily requirements for vitamin C, vitamin A in the form of beta-carotene, calcium, magnesium, and iron. Protein content, while not high in absolute terms, is notable for a leafy green, comparable to or exceeding lettuce, and present in a form that requires no cooking to be digestible. The vitamin C concentration varies with season and growing conditions, but samples tested in late winter and early spring, the period when the plant is most actively growing, have returned values well above those of common salad greens. This is not a trivial margin. It is the difference between a food that contributes to nutrient intake and a food that supplies it. The plant is also exceptionally high in water content, which partially explains its short shelf life, but also made it useful historically as a hydrating green rather than a calorie source. In contexts where water quality was uncertain and fresh vegetables were scarce, eating moisture-rich greens was not merely nutritional, it was practical. From a biological perspective, the plant is nearly ideal for low-input food production. It germinates in cold soil, often at temperatures just above freezing. It tolerates frost repeatedly without damage. It grows in poor soils, disturbed ground, compacted earth. It does not require fertilizer. Once established, it reseeds continuously, producing multiple generations per year without replanting. It completes its life cycle quickly. From germination to flowering to seed set can occur in as little as 5 to 6 weeks under favorable conditions. This speed allows it to occupy ecological niches that slower plants cannot exploit: bare ground in early spring, gaps in crop rotations, edges and margins where nothing else is growing. It is a pioneer species. Where soil has been stripped, compacted, or degraded, this plant is often among the first to colonize. Its presence does not deplete the soil. It covers it, reducing erosion and providing organic matter as it dies back. It spreads both by seed and vegetatively. Stems root at nodes where they touch the ground, forming new plants that remain connected to the parent until they establish independently. This allows rapid colonization of available space and makes the plant extraordinarily resilient to disturbance. Pulling it up often leaves rooted nodes that regenerate within days. In agricultural terms, this is exactly the kind of resilience that makes a plant difficult to eradicate. In ecological terms, it is the kind of resilience that makes a plant valuable for soil stabilization and regeneration. The plant has no known serious pests or diseases in most climates. It does not attract herbivores in damaging numbers. Birds eat the seeds, but seed production is abundant enough that predation does not limit spread. It grows across temperate and cool regions globally. In North America, Europe, Asia, anywhere winters are cold and springs are wet, the plant establishes readily. It is found in gardens, parks, lawns, roadsides, agricultural edges, and wild spaces. It is, in many regions, one of the most common plants on Earth. And yet, functionally, it feeds no one. The infrastructure does not exist. There is no market, no supply chain, no distribution network. There are no commercial growers, no seed companies, no value-added products. The plant is free, abundant, and nutritionally comparable to crops that require inputs, labor, and land. But it cannot be sold. And so, in the logic of the modern food system, it has no value. The plant is called chickweed. The name is old and its origin unclear. Some sources suggest it refers to chickens eating the plant readily, which they do. Others point to the seeds, which are small and numerous, and were fed to caged birds. The name has stuck, regardless of etymology. It grows today in nearly every temperate region. In North America, it is found from coast to coast, from southern Canada to the northern United States and beyond. In Europe, it is ubiquitous. In Asia, it appears across climatic zones that support winter-dormant or cool-season growth. The plant is low-growing, rarely exceeding a few inches in height. It forms dense mats of slender, branching stems. The leaves are small, oval, and bright green. The stems are slightly succulent, with a fine line of hairs running along one side, an identifying feature visible under close inspection. The flowers are tiny, white, star-shaped, and easily overlooked. It blooms throughout its growing season, which in mild climates can be nearly year-round. In colder regions, it appears in late winter, grows vigorously through spring, then often dies back in summer heat before returning in autumn. Harvest is simple. The entire above-ground portion of the plant is edible. It can be pinched off at the base or cut with scissors. The texture is tender enough to eat raw. No bitterness, no fibrous stems that require removal. It can be added to salads, used like lettuce, or cooked briefly like spinach. It does not store well. Even refrigerated, it wilts quickly. This is not a green that can be harvested in bulk and saved. It is a green that must be eaten fresh, ideally within hours of picking. For gardeners, chickweed is often unwanted. It spreads quickly, and in cultivated beds, it competes with intentional crops. Removing it is straightforward but requires persistence. Any rooted node left behind will regenerate. For foragers, it is among the easiest wild greens to identify and among the safest to eat. There are no toxic lookalikes that share its combination of features. It grows in accessible places, parks, lawns, garden edges, and is available earlier in the season than most other wild foods. It never required domestication. It never required breeding, selection, or genetic improvement. It simply grew, and people ate it, for as long as people have lived in climates where it thrives. And it is still here, still growing in the margins, still appearing in February, in March, when the ground begins to thaw and nothing else is green, still producing leaves that are tender, nutritious, and free. The knowledge was always here. It was written in herbals, in household records, in the collective memory of rural communities that understood what each season offered. We just stopped looking.